I am your host, Richard G. Medlock, and this is the Medlock Post radio show. This is where we educate, entertain, enlighten, and empower. Today is June 28th, 2022. Today's episode is Constitution 101, the 10th Amendment. The views and opinions on the Medlock Post radio show are the views and opinions of the host. They are not necessarily the views and opinions of Spreaker.com, its corporations, affiliates, or any other podcast streaming services. Hello, how are you? You still in a whirlwind? This weekend, I sat down and actually watched a little bit of TV, entertainment TV. Not the news. I knew you know what the news is going to say. So why watch it? You're going to have anger on one side and common sense on the other side. And so there was a commercial came up, and they started playing a song I had not heard in a long time. It's from the 1970s. It was by Cat Stevens, and it's entitled Wild World. Hey, baby, baby, it's a wild world. It's a great song. Look it up on one of your music providers. Wild World by Cat Stevens. And I sit there and I says, how appropriate for what we're going through right now. It is wild. It is crazy. And a lot of it, ladies and gentlemen, is unbelievable. And we're going to talk about some of that today. But again, our episode today, and this is episode 8. This is our 8th one. We started June 15th. Is Constitution 101, the 10th Amendment. And our goal today really is to educate. And as we educate, we hope you are enlightened and empowered. And if you're entertained, hooray. And we'll go from there. We're probably going to be a little longer program today. This is to be recorded yesterday at around 1 o'clock. Yesterday turned into a whirlwind. I came home from all my meetings in the morning, ready to come in and record the podcast and get it out. And the people were here to put in our new HVAC that had been out freezing. So there was too much going on to try to record yesterday, and I apologize that I'm a day late. So this morning I threw in a couple of other things, and so we might go a little bit longer than normal today. That's fine. A lot to cover. But I want to start, of course, with my opening monologue. And let me make some things clear today. People have made comments to the effect that the messages on the Medlock Post radio show are positive and does not reflect the real world. Well, there is some truth to that. But it is not from looking through rose-colored glasses. I am well aware of the evil in this world and in America. I am fully aware of the hate that is in some people's hearts. I see the tragedies in front of our eyes on a daily basis. I hear the lies and deceiving from those in prominent positions of power and leadership as they try to convince people to follow their wrong guidance down an ugly road of despair. I see the effects on people who have been indoctrinated in our education system to hate others who do not believe as they do and to hate America. I see people refusing to take personal responsibility for their actions and decisions. I see those in position of authority fail to uphold the laws, whether they be local, state, or federal. And by doing that, criminals continue to do criminal acts, evil acts, because they are not being punished as the law prescribes. I see the awful effort by many to destroy a great land we call home, America. I see the hatred and division, that has been created between people because of skin color, because of religious beliefs, and because of politics. I see the acts of insanity from people who are so blinded from hatred or self-loathing that they can't see any amount of truth given to them. I see so many people who have been deceived into giving away their freedoms in hopes of false promises made. But the worst are those who have hardened their hearts and have no respect for another person's life and will not think twice about ending a life for whatever the reason may be. Troubling calls for Clarence Thomas's assassination spread across social media after Roe reversed, and other justices are now being threatened. They're calling for their assassination. It is not my purpose here at the Medlock Post radio show to dwell on those things. Yes, they will come up in conversations and will be part of discussions, but they will not drive the content of this program. Our purpose that we stated from the beginning is to educate, entertain, enlighten, and empower. That is done from a positive perspective because I believe there are far better and positive people than negative and bad. There are many people looking for answers to the dilemma that face us today and we will face tomorrow. I believe history is there for us to learn from and apply those lessons, not to scoff at it or bury it because we don't like what happened. There are many truths that are eternal that man cannot change. We need to gain a better understanding of those eternal truths to be a better person, better family, better community, and better nation. Man does not create truth. Man is to discover truth. Thomas Jefferson said, "The greatest danger to American freedom is a government that ignores the Constitution." Thomas Paine gave us this warning. Listen carefully. Quote, "He that would make his own liberty secure must guard even his enemy from oppression. For if he violates this duty, he establishes a precedent that will reach to himself." Unquote. Thomas Paine. Words that ring true today. This is what happens under tyrannies. They get half the people, we've got to stop these other half from doing this, or we got to divide by skin color and religion and all this, and they get people working against each other, and then one group loses freedoms, and the others sit back and, okay, we've taken care of them. Okay, you got them controlled. Then they're going to come after you. Then they're going to come after the next group and the next group. This is how tyrannies work. This is what history taught the founding fathers, and they lived through this. And we need to understand that today. It's my opening monologue. Now, my show on Saturday was the Constitution prevails. The Constitution is still standing, folks, because there were a big ruling yesterday out of SCOTUS, Monday the 27th, ruled in favor of religious freedom for the coach, Kennedy, I think it was Coach Kennedy, in the state of Washington. He wanted to pray on the field. Before a game, after a game, he'd go on the field by himself and kneel down and pray. And then players followed. They came in. People from the community came in. The school said, "Whoa, you can't do that. No, that's wrong. You can't pray." And they suspended him, then they fired him. Well, the Supreme Court said, you have violated the First Amendment of the Constitution. Folks, the Constitution is being put back where it needs to be as the law of the land. Another ruling that came down, and this from the New York State Supreme Court, and they ruled that New York City passed a law and said that illegals or non-citizens can vote in our elections. This is in New York City. And the estimate was that in November 2020, about 800,000 illegals voted. Now, it's interesting, yesterday when the first news report came out, it was illegals voting. And then midday, it was turned to non-citizens voting. And then this morning, it was foreigners. It's interesting how they went from illegals to non-citizens to foreigners. But they were right the first time, illegals. So New York City's in a huff. They're a huff about the gun ruling on them, that they couldn't restrict concealed weapons. and there's a lot to say about that, but I'm not going to talk on about guns here today. All right, the 10th Amendment to the Constitution reads as follows. The powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people. So, simple terms, the amendment says the federal government has only those powers specifically granted by the Constitution, or we the people, and these powers include the power to declare war, to collect taxes, to regulate interstate business, and others that are listed in the articles within the Constitution. Okay, you see the limits there? This is what drives the Democrat socialists nuts. They don't like those limits. Obama, in his campaigns, preached against that. It limits us. We got to work around that. And are you hearing that today? We're going to work around the Constitution because of all these rulings. What's the purpose of the 10th Amendment? The 10th Amendment was intended to confirm the understanding of the people at the time of the Constitution was adopted, that powers not granted to the United States were reserved to the states or to the people, we the people. It added nothing to the instrument or as originally ratified. Now, folks, the people knew that they had to hedge up federal authority. It was absolutely essential because of their past experiences with corrupt and abusive governments in the past. In the Federalist Papers, number 15, Alexander Hamilton wrote, quote, there is in the nature of sovereign power an impatience of control that disposes those who are invested with the exercises of it to look with an evil eye upon all external attempts to restrain or direct its operations. This tendency is not difficult to be accounted for. It has its origins in the love of power. We're reading from Federalist Paper number 15, Alexander Hamilton. Power controlled or abridged is almost always the rival and enemy of the power by which it is controlled or abridged. We the people control it. Continuing. This simple proposition will teach us how little reason there is to expect that the persons entrusted with the administration of the affairs of the particular members of a confederacy, i.e., the federal government, will at all times be ready with perfect good humor and an unbiased regard to the public will to execute the resolutions or decrees of the general authority. The reverse of this expectation results from the constitution of man. So here he's saying, people get into power, they're going to abuse it. And we see it. Now, I know some of you out there on the left that are listening to this say, well, yeah, the Supreme Court abused its power. And yeah, the Republicans are abusing their power. And that's fine. You can think that side if you want. But I'm hoping that you will take a look at this and understand that you are losing your freedom by following that way of thinking. Now, the original balance between federal governments and states. On Saturday's show, I read some more quotes about that. But here, this is Alexander Hamilton wrote an essay on freedom and power. And hang on a second. My page won't turn. There we go. But the separation of powers between the states and the federal government was designed to reinforce the principle of limited government, not only on the federal side, but also on the state and local side. I think we've lost sight of that sometimes on our local and state side. They're limited too. The federal government was supreme in all matters relating to its responsibility, but it was specifically restricted from invading the independence and sovereign authority reserved to the states. Now, we could sit here, I'm going to probably do a program about how they've invaded the independence and sovereign authority reserved to the states. And ladies and gentlemen, there's a long list. The founders felt that unless this principle of dual sovereignty was carefully perpetuated, the healthy independence of each would deteriorate, and eventually one or the other would become totally dominant. Now, that's what I was talking about. This invasion has been going on for years. And the federal government has taken over this dominant role. They've pushed we the people to the side. But guess what? That is changing. If the federal government became dominant, it would mean the end of local self-government and the security of the individual. Is this ringing some bells, folks? Is the light coming on? I hope so. On the other hand, if the states became dominant, the federal government would become so weak that the structure of the nation would begin to fractionalize and disintegrate into smaller units. Now, we had that happen in 1860 and in 1861, and that went on to 1865. It was called the Civil War, and states in the South seceded from the Union, and a war was fought. States' rights of the southern states were being violated not only by the federal government, but by the northern states. And yes, slavery was part of that equation, not the whole equation, was part of it. Now let's get to Alexander Hamilton's essay on freedom and power, in which he states, quote, "This balance between the national and state governments ought to be dwelt on with peculiar attention, as it is for the utmost importance. It forms a double security to the people." Double security. If one encroaches on their rights, they will find a powerful protection in the other. Indeed, they will both be prevented from overpassing their constitutional limits by certain rivalship which will ever subsist between them. Unquote. Folks, we have seen what he said in Federalist number 15 and in the essay on freedom and power. We have seen these things that he warned about come about. Right now, here in America. And what is happening at the Supreme Court right now is to try to correct those things. Those on the left, listen to this. I beg you, and on the right, and the middle, and the up and the down. Listen to this that I'm giving you here today. The founders felt that by having a wholesome balance between the federal and state governments, the people would have recourse to one or the other in case of usurpation or abuse by either. Well, we've had both of those going on, and more from the federal government than the states. Well, not all states, but some states have really abused that power. And Hamilton said about this in the Federalist Papers, number 28, quote, "Power being almost always the rival of power, the general government will at all times stand ready to check the usurpations of the state governments, and these will have the same disposition towards the general government. The people here, by throwing themselves into either scale, will infallibly make it preponderant. If their rights are invaded by either, they can make use of the other as the instrument of redress." Unquote. Federalist Paper number 28. This is why we study history, ladies and gentlemen, to understand these things. And that's why I said in my opening monologue, there's the indoctrination in the education system. How many people that's gone to school in the last 30 years can even tell you that they've even heard of the Federalist Papers? Probably not too many. That is sad. All right, let me read a quote here from Mark Levin. He's on Fox News. He's written some great books. about America, the Constitution. His latest is on Marxism. But to me, the greatest book that he wrote was in 2004, 2005. It was called Men in Black. Now, Mark Levin is a constitutional attorney, extremely smart. And he was on Maria Bartiromo yesterday or today. I don't know when it was. But they were talking about this ruling. It might have been sometime during the weekend that he was on. But this book he wrote, Men in Black, in 2005, and I bought it, and I took it with me on a business cruise. You know, you go 3-4 days, and you do all these meetings in the morning, then you're free the rest of the time. But I read the book on the cruise. It was that fascinating. And if you can get it, the book deals with how the United States Supreme Court, over the years, especially after the Civil War, started making little rulings to take the power away from the states and from the people and give it to the federal government. It's a fascinating book. You can still get it, I hope. So, Men in Black by Mark Levin. But here's what Mark Levin had to say about this ruling. And this is why I asked the question, did you hear what they said? Did you hear it? I think after they heard Roe versus Wade is reversed, the left stopped listening. Seriously. You just stopped listening. He says, quote, let's be clear about what this decision says. This decision says something really unique in American history. We have a very, very powerful body, the Supreme Court, saying we don't have any power. Get that? Supreme Court doesn't have any power. When's the last time you heard Congress or the president or the bureaucracy say, we don't have any power? So we're going to give this authority where it belongs, back to the people in the states. He continues, it's that simple. They're interpreting the Constitution. It's not taking anybody's rights away. It's not giving rights to anybody. First of all, God does that. But that said, there's 50 states for a reason. We're not a parliamentary system like in Canada or like in France. We have 50 states for a reason, 50 legislatures for a reason, so that decisions can be made by the people in those states, unquote. Folks, that is a quote that I would insert into the Federalist Papers. That's powerful. The Supreme Court said federal government has no power over this. They should not have made this decision in the first place. It was a state issue. Texas should have made this decision. Back in 1973. But it got thrown to the Supreme Court. And they made an erroneous decision. And they used a flawed interstate commerce ruling to make that decision. What does interstate commerce have to do with somebody in Texas wanting to end the life of a fetus? Well, absolutely nothing. So it was basically judicial activism that gave us Roe versus Wade. And Mark Levin has said that over and over. I've said it over and over. And so have a lot of other people. I remember the debates going on back then. It was big news to follow. And guess who was president? Who's president? Richard M. Nixon. Yeah, that's right. Good call. Now, there's also, I pulled this article, and it's interesting. This was in Newsmax. It was actually June 24th. It came out Friday afternoon. Came out at 7:17 p.m., the night of the ruling. So all of these people are out there screaming and yelling that they've had their rights taken away. Women are going to die, et cetera, et cetera. You know, on and on. You've heard what's going on. You've seen the news. You've seen the quotes. But Newsmax comes out. It was kind of interesting. They went down all 50 states and explained in one paragraph what's going on in those states. Well, I went through it, and I found that today in the United States of America, there are 41 states where abortion is still legal under state law. 41 states. Now that number can go down, it can go up, etc. So they're screaming that they have nowhere to go. They have 41 states where they can go today and get an abortion. Now, make it clear, I am against abortion. So that makes me a very bad white supremacist, right? I don't know if I'm bad. I don't know if I'm a supremacist, but I am white. So a lot of their yelling and screaming is for naught. They're making a mountain out of a molehill. Why do you want to burn down the Supreme Court, assassinate the judges, when you need to be going to your states and having conversations with them? They're the ones that have this put in their lap now. And that's where it should have been in the first place. And a whole lot of other things. So they're out there screaming they don't have anywhere to go. Their rights are taken away. You have 41 states, folks. And Louisiana and Utah, they had trigger laws kick in, and some state judge suspended them for right now. I don't know if they'll hold or not. But so those triggers were put on hold. And that would have taken the number down to 39. But I just went by this list where it's either legal, potentially illegal, or full. But things are going to change, okay? But I'm just trying to make you aware of what's going on out there. Now, Supreme Court's not done, folks. I'm kind of out of context here. But there's another big ruling that's going to be coming out of the Supreme Court. And it has to do with West Virginia versus the EPA. The West Virginia versus the EPA asks whether important policies that impact the lives of all Americans should be made by unelected D.C. bureaucrats or by Congress. This SCOTUS could well decide that ruling by executive agency fiat is no longer acceptable. Now, how did we get here? How did we get here with the EPA and other agencies making laws, and this was instigated under Obama when he was trying to shut down all the coal mines. And I'm not going to get into specifics to it. There's an article on Fox News. You can go read about it. But again, this was another one of those overreaches of the federal government, their abuse of power. So years ago, you've heard of the administrative state. This started back under Woodrow Wilson, back in 1920, in 1918 to 1920. He wanted to set up an administrative state so that regulations and laws could be created without having to go through the legislature, and the president didn't have to sign off on. And so when people were upset with him, Congress could sit there and say, we didn't do that. So what they started doing, and especially under Obamacare, when that bill was written, they started sliding sentences into bills that says, here's some new authority, but the secretary of or the director of has the authority to create new regulations, laws, change what's there that are binding without Congress authority. Now, the Constitution says that if an agency wants to put out a new regulation, it has to go to Congress within, I think, 30 days, and Congress has a time period that they vote on it, yay or nay. If they don't vote on it, it doesn't happen. So what Congress did by putting the sentence in there that the Secretary of has authority to, they could just make laws, make regulations. And under Obamacare and some other bills they passed in that time period, when there were 60 Democratic senators sitting there and they had control of the House, they got all these things going with all these sentences in there. So the legislature literally gave their power away to a certain extent. So then the EPA goes out, they start putting on all these regulations, et cetera, et cetera. Now, folks, if the Supreme Court rules against the EPA on this, it will affect every federal agency in this government. That they have to stop doing that. Now, it would be nice, and I don't know how the lawsuit was worded or whatever, it would be nice that the Supreme Court says you've got to remove all those unconstitutional regulations, laws, requirements, etc. They're gone. Right? Now, that would be nice because most of them are harmful to not only you and I as individuals and citizens, but to businesses. They put out $33 billion a year to maintain meeting all these regulations by the federal government. $33 billion. That's a tax, folks. And guess what? That gets passed on to you and I as a consumer. So this could be another really upsetting, seething moment for the Democrat Socialists if they lose this battle. So watch this one, SCOTUS, West Virginia versus EPA. I'm going to watch for it. It could come out this week, the ruling. The press might try to bury it. But I don't rely on the mainstream media. I have my own sources. All right. We are moving right along here, folks. And still more to cover. Wow. Ladies and gentlemen, in the opening monologue, I mentioned deception and lying. As news reports and articles appeared this weekend, a pattern was developing. Attacks on the Constitution of the United States. The document, here's what they're saying, that these old things. The document is old and not viable for today in America. The originalist theory died with the founding fathers, and the Republicans are trying to keep it alive. They're claiming that the Constitution says there are rights that really aren't there. The smears, not only to the 5 justices, but to the Supreme Court as a whole. These are very, very old sound bites and falsehoods that have been echoed for decades and proven false. But one thing was very obvious in the articles and news reports. It is that this is the same media that lied to America about Donald Trump for 4 years concerning the Russian hoax, continuing to lie about January 6th, continuing to lie about the Trump family, the First Lady, and other aspects to do what they could do to bring down Donald Trump and his family and his businesses. Now, a lot of these articles were in The Guardian, Politico, New York Times, and other mainstream medias. These are all political, left-wing political propaganda news agencies. And it's just sad that to see this happening. The same media that helps a democratic socialist deceive and confuse the American people. Let me ask you these questions. If SCOTUS had not overturned Roe versus Wade, would the media and the left be hailing SCOTUS as heroes and the Constitution as a great document? You bet you they would be. Yes. Would they be demanding the court be abolished? No. Would they be demanding justices be impeached or removed or even assassinated? No. Would the pro-life citizens be protesting in front of the justices' homes? No. Would the pro-life citizens be firebombing abortion centers and looting? No. You see the hypocrisy here, folks? The hypocrisy. Now, let's go. The Wall Street Journal did an article in response to some people screaming and yelling that these justices need to be impeached because they lied at their confirmation hearings. And AOC Cortez is leading the charge on this, and she doesn't know what she's talking about. Name a time when she really does know what she's talking about. We'll wait. Okay, we're not going to wait anymore. We have a show to do. But they wrote an article totally putting down, it was actually an opinion piece from the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal. destroying this thing that Gorsuch and Kavanaugh and Barrett lied. They did not lie. Justices do not give an answer when asked, how will you rule on a specific situation? They will not answer that. Because if they answer that, then they have excluded themselves or recused. They would have to recuse themselves because they already have an opinion. So they don't answer it. Now, what they're saying is they said it is settled law. At the time of those hearings, it was settled law. You understand the difference, folks? All right, but this is just a short quote making my point that we're trying to make about this. Did you hear the ruling? Did you not listen after they said overturned? And apparently they didn't. Quote, the fury, love that word, the fury of the left's reaction isn't merely about guns and abortion. It reflects their grief at having lost the court as a vehicle for achieving policy goals they can't get through legislature. Now, the history there is they packed the courts, the lower courts, with radical left judges, and they were literally making law in their rulings. That's called judicial activism. They are to only rule on existing laws. Well, they were using the courts because the democratic socialists know they have no principles to stand on, no morals anymore. How can you? How can you say you have morals after this past weekend? You want to kill, you want to assassinate people, you want to burn things down. That's not moral. They're losing. And I will keep saying that over and over. They're losing, and they're losing it in their mind. Go back and watch the videos of Senator Elizabeth Warren and AOC and Nancy Pelosi. They were, just hysterical. And I'm getting hysterical. All right, finish this quote. The cultural victories they achieved by judicial fiat will now have to be won by persuading voters. We understand their frustration, but they ought to try democracy for a change. Unquote. This is a great piece in the Wall Street Journal, but these two sentences sum it all up perfectly. The democratic socialists have lost control, and they know it. And they have fallen off that cliff, folks. They have gone over the edge. Because all they have left to stand on is chaos and fear, division, hatred, and violence. That's it. They have nothing left. And we have seen that in full display this weekend. And even up to today, it continues. And the reason they're going full-blown hysterical is because they've lost it. Now, over the weekend, we heard over and over about I lost that train of thought. Hang on a second. The election. I'm sorry. That's what happens when you get old. Over and over that the Democrats want to make the overturning of Roe versus Wade their number one campaign issue. Their number one campaign issue. Number one. Wow, folks. They did a poll Sunday, and I'm sorry I didn't write it down, but somebody, it might have been Rasmussen or somebody like that, one of the good polls, went out and asked the question, how important is it to you about the overturning of Roe versus Wade? Not are you for it or against it. How important is it to you? Big difference. Here are the numbers. 23% said that it was somewhat important. Somewhat. 66% said it's not important. And 11% said doesn't matter when it comes to the election. And this is all pertaining to the election in November. So only 23% of those polled, and it was a pretty good cross-section of people, said it's somewhat important, but you know what? We're out here losing ground with our income, fighting inflation. We're having to cancel things or do away with things that we normally have because of inflation. We've cut back our spending because of inflation. We're still spending the same amount but getting less. We're more concerned with the policies, the tyrannical policies that are coming out of Washington, D.C. We're more concerned with our children's education. We're tired of them being indoctrinated and other things that are more important. Now, a poll was done a couple of weeks ago, and it listed the top 10 things the American people are concerned about. Well, now you might have Roe versus Wade being done away with, maybe down at the bottom, if it's in there. But guess what thing is not coming up on these polls about what is important? Can you guess what's not there? Yeah. Climate change is not on that list of the top 10. It never has been. It's normally somewhere around the bottom. 1 or 2% of the people think climate change is important. Climate change is a scam, folks. I've gone through 7 decades. I've heard, I think it's something like 47 prophecies about climate change or global heating and global cooling and all that stuff. Not one of them has come about. The earth is still around. It hasn't died. Humanity hadn't been wiped out. The North and South Pole haven't melted. You know, the East Coast hasn't flooded. You know, the temperature's not up to 150 degrees. It's not down to 70 below zero, except at the North and South Poles. This is what we're dealing with, folks. All right, a couple of other things that popped up I had a friend send this to me, and I guess she thought I would just jump on this bandwagon. And she's a liberal and so forth. And feminists are blaming men for their pregnancies. Okay, we've got to blame somebody. That's the leftist way. That's the I don't have any personal responsibility way. It's somebody else's fault. So listen to this, and then I'm going to break it down. It's real short. Excuse me. All right, I'm sorry. I had to get a drink of water. I bet implementing mandatory child support at first detected heartbeat and a required billing of their insurance for 50% of the resulting medical bill would change a lot of dudes' minds about women's choices. Now, at first glance, that sounds good, right? Oh, let's get these potential fathers, bring them back into the fold. Well, that should have been done 50, 60 years ago when all of a sudden you don't need a husband or a father, the government will take care of you. Okay. And you're going, what's he talking about? Talking about welfare, folks. And I know you're sitting there thinking, man, that was a racist comment. No, it's not. There are far more white people on welfare than minorities. All right, let's take a look at this first thing. I bet implementing mandatory child support at first detected heartbeat. Implementing mandatory child support at first detected heartbeat. Now, wait a minute. I thought the message all these years was, it's just a clump of tissue and it's not a human being. Excuse me. Are you now saying that at the first heartbeat, it's a human being? I'm a little confused. Which is it? Have you changed your stance now to try to get sympathy? I don't know. First detected heartbeat. See, they claim that didn't happen. There was no life there. Now they're saying there's life there. All right, that was my first question. Then, required billing of their insurance for 50% of the resulting medical bill. All right, now I don't know how you're going to get an insurance company to do that. And number one, a guy's probably going to challenge that he's a father, so you're going to have to go through all the DNA testing to prove that he is, right? All right, so anyway, follow me here. And then the last part would change a lot of dudes' minds about women's choices. A lot of dudes. Hey, all you dudes out there. A lot of dudes' minds about women's choices. Which choices are they talking about? The choice to have an abortion, or the choice to have intimate physical relationships with a man, or dude, as they say. Which decision or choice are they talking about here? It's not clear. There's a lot of things, a lot of choices that happen for this to come about. Well, what about the women's choice? I know you feminists are going to jump all over me on this, and that's fine. But this is truth. Man is to discover truth. What about your choice as a woman? And of course, the choice of the dudes to use protection during intimate physical relations. That's a choice. One way or the other, use protection or have contraceptives or not. So which dudes' minds are going to change? About what? So there's a lot of choices going on here. Now, we can presume this is about abortion. So the dudes don't have to have any financial responsibility. Well, I can tell you about a lot of married dudes and divorced dudes that walk away from their responsibilities after they legally had children. So this playing the sympathy card right now is not playing well in America. Playing the victim is not playing well in America. Victimhood is only in your mind. You have been lied to and deceived into believing that you are a victim every time you turn around. And now you're out there, oh, we are victim to the dudes. Okay, another thing that they proposed, I know that little segment's going to be just very controversial, but it's to get you to think, ladies and gentlemen, no matter which part of the political spectrum you're on, or even not a political spectrum, it's to get you to think. Women call for sex strike against men for retaliation for overturning Roe v. Wade. At least this time they use the word men instead of dudes. Well, it's an interesting, they threaten this over and over. Oh, we're going to go on a sex strike. Well, you know, that's probably a good thing. It is just interesting what is happening out there. All righty. Let me skip that because we have gone over my normal time, and that's fine. And let me skip these last two things. I'll bring them up in another broadcast. Now, I will be doing a broadcast tomorrow. Get back on schedule here. I do apologize. Yesterday just was a whirlwind. But let me wrap this up with a beautiful thing I saw and a great positive. Franz Kafka was a German author. He wrote some great books. Some of them were a little weird. But I studied him. I took a class in college, European literature, Russian, German, French literature, and others. And he was one of our reading list. And he only lived 40 years. And he never married, and he had no children. But this is a little story, true story about him that will apply to all of us, ladies and gentlemen, kind of taken aside from where we are. And he walked through a park in Berlin one day when he met a girl who was crying, little girl, because she had lost her favorite doll. She and Kafka searched for the doll unsuccessfully. Kafka told her to meet him there the next day, and they would come back to look for her. The next day, when they had not yet found the doll, Kafka gave the girl a letter written by the doll saying, "Please don't cry. I took a trip to see the world. I will write to you about my adventures." Wow. Thus began a story which continued until the end of Kafka's life. During their meetings, Kafka read the letters of the doll carefully written with adventures and conversations that the girl found adorable. Finally, Kafka brought back the doll, which he had bought a new one, that had returned to Berlin. So now the doll has come back. "It doesn't look like my doll at all," she said. Kafka handed her another letter in which the doll wrote, "My travels have changed me." The little girl hugged the doll and brought her home. A year later, Kafka died. Many years later, the now adult girl found a letter inside the doll. In the tiny letter signed by Kafka, it was written, "Everything you love will probably be lost, but in the end, love will return in another way. Live life with no regrets." What a beautiful story, that we need to just live our lives. Things will happen. We have losses. We have gains. We have love. We have hurt. But that's part of life, folks. And that, folks, is the Medlock Post radio show for today. Let's listen to a little "This Ain't My First Rodeo."